The elites are cracking down on speech all over the world. Are woke companies finally learning their lesson? And yes, they are coming for your children. All of that in this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Welcome back to the Mayoral Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Matt Mayer. Before I get into today's content, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today. On a personal note, I just want to make sure that I thanked everybody that was out there watching my videos. I did get my first 100-view video. It was a YouTube short. Currently, it's sitting at 150 views. But just want to say thank you to everyone that took the time to watch that video. I've gotten just over 50 views on my last video in Rumble, so that's a new personal high. If you look at kind of my earlier videos, those are going to be somewhere in the 50 range as well. But most of those views were me just kind of clicking through the video, trying to work out some of the bugs in the first couple of videos. So again, thank you to everybody who's been tuning into my content. So this video I'm actually shooting about a week ahead of when I'm going to release it. Typically I try to shoot the video on Monday or Tuesday in the week and release it later after doing some editing on Thursday and Friday. This video I'm actually recording, it is Wednesday, June 29th. I have visitors coming for the 4th of July, so I will not be able to film during the early part of next week due to the holiday. So happy 4th of July to everybody. By the time this airs, it will be probably somewhere around July 5th, July 6th, somewhere in that neighborhood. AP from Australia. Australia's online safety watchdog has issued a legal notice to Twitter demanding an explanation of what the social media giant is doing to tackle a surge of online hate speech since Tesla CEO Elon Musk bought the platform. Australia's e-Safety Commission describes itself as the world's first government agency dedicated to keeping people safer online. This is just absolutely insanity to me. The Ministry of Truth, the Australian Ministry of Truth, seems to be out there. Remember Nina Jankowicz with the Biden administration, who didn't even last any time in her position? She was going to be the kind of Ministry of Truth czar, and Australia is bragging about being able to cut down on hate speech. My biggest problem with hate speech is that there's just a vast array of different speech that could be considered hate speech. It could be overt hate speech. I might say I hate X or I hate Y, whatever it might be, but some is going to be acceptable. I'll use an example on like one end of the spectrum to say I hate Nazis. I think most people, or almost every sane person, would say, okay, that's an acceptable group of people to hate. Those are pretty repulsive people. They hate people just because of who they are. They think that they're supreme in one way or another, or in every single way. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you might say, I hate this group of ethnic people, whatever it might be, and that's completely unacceptable hate speech. So you see that there's going to be a sliding scale in there. There's going to be something in the middle, some multiple things in the middle that I might say, hey, that's not really that offensive, but you might think is extremely offensive. And that's the problem with hate speech, is that there's going to be an arbitrary line that's drawn by people that have a certain viewpoint. And when you do that, you suppress these people to the point where they feel like they're being attacked and almost validated because of the fact that you're trying to shut them down. So getting rid of hate speech, the best way to do it is better speech. I think I've heard a lot of people say that, and that's true. And it's always been true. However, these Australian authorities are trying to become the authority, essentially, on what is acceptable discourse and what is unacceptable discourse. And that's when you start dividing people. And that's why we've kind of gotten to the point where we are today, not only in the United States, but kind of all across the Western world. So continuing on with the article. The agency said Thursday it received more complaints about online hate on Twitter in the past 12 months than any other platform, and had received an increasing number of reports of serious online abuse since Musk took over the company in October. The Australian agency boss, e-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant, said she sent a notice to the San Francisco-based company Wednesday with 36 detailed questions on how Twitter polices its hateful content and how it's enforced. If Twitter does not respond with factual and truthful responses to all questions within 28 days, an Australian judge could fine the company up to 700,000 Australian dollars or 476 American dollars for every day of the delay, Inman Grant said. Quote, the whole idea of the basic online safety expectation is that global companies like Twitter are enforcing their own policies and that they have got people and technology to keep their platform safe. They have a hateful content policy that says you may not directly attack other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, etc. And I want to know if fundamentally they are enforcing these policies and how effective they are in doing so, she added. So I'm going to go and just say I don't agree with those policies only because you're protecting certain people, but you're not protecting other people. You've deemed that these people are worthy of protecting and other people are not worthy of protecting. There's groups that are on there or that are not on there that you will not enforce any hateful type of speech on. Again, I'm using the extreme, like Nazis. Anyone puts out there that they hate Nazis or all Nazis need to die or something crazy like that, those people are likely not going to see any type of suspension. They're not going to see any type of moderation on a platform like Twitter. Now, Twitter's a private company, so they have the authority to say, hey, this is what we deem as hateful, and that's what we deem as not hateful, or that's what we deem as acceptable, that's what we deem as not acceptable. But it's kind of a slippery slope, and especially when government gets involved. When government gets involved, and that's why I'm against all these discrimination laws as it applies to private businesses. When it comes to the government, absolutely. The government should not be doing anything that they're allowing citizens A to do and citizens B not to do. That's why something like affirmative action is supposed to get rid of biases that were already in place in a lot of places in the United States where African American people were not getting opportunities because of the color of their skin. Now, the government need to put that regulation on themselves. They cannot, anything that's government or government funded or sponsored, a government sponsored entity, anything like that needs to live up to those guidelines. I think that that's absolutely true. But when you start imposing those on private businesses, that's where we start seeing issues and the breakdown in that logic. So people have to hire based on the color of their skin, a minimum number of people. That's favoring one group at the expense of another group. So that's where I have a fundamental issue with things like affirmative action. Not that it wasn't necessary. I think during the time it probably was necessary to encourage those behaviors. But I think the time has kind of come and gone, and I don't think it's the government's place to say you need to have this amount of people or that represent this group and this amount of people that represent that group. It should be up to the company. Now, that said, if I were to go to an establishment, a privately owned establishment that says no white males are allowed in this establishment, I would probably not be happy with that rule. But at the same time, the owner of that business would have the right to do so. Now, that's a terrible business model to exclude any group of people. But if somebody wants to be stupid and say, I don't want black people in my business, that's fine. I'm not going to shop there either because I don't like that policy. That's a terrible policy. And not only are you getting rid of 13% of the population, but you're getting rid of a lot of other consumers like myself. Again, the government being the arbiter of it is really my issue. When the government does it on their side to basically limit what they can do, that's when I'm in favor of them putting those restrictions on there. They can't discriminate on this. They can't discriminate on that. And this is where you're seeing a lot of issues too. The one thing or one of the few things that's protected after the Civil Rights Act had been passed is people are allowed to discriminate. I'm sure people are familiar with the case that I believe it's out of Colorado with the religious baker that didn't want to bake a cake for a gay couple because it was against their religion. That was protected. But if somebody just said, hey, I don't want to bake a cake for you, they cannot do that. They cannot refuse that service because because gay people are protected class, or black people are protected class, or whatever group of people is protected class. But under religion, they're able to do that. So that's where the left comes in, and they say things like you're just hiding behind your bigotry by saying you're hiding your bigotry rather behind your religion, and they're taking offense to any type of situations, kind of like that baker that came out of Colorado that ultimately won the Supreme Court case. But that's my problem when government gets involved in private entities, is they say you can discriminate for this reason or you can't discriminate for that reason. And government really needs to, in my opinion, has to be hands off in that situation. If somebody doesn't want to bake a cake for somebody, they don't really need a reason not to bake a cake for somebody. That said, don't shop there. Like, that's not a place that I personally would go to. I don't like when people decide that they have a moral reason or whatever it is to not serve somebody, but they have that right to do so. And at me as a consumer, I have the right to not consume their products, and I won't. So again, a long way of saying the government needs to be out of the equation totally, especially in today's day and age with social media and how fast word spreads. When things like this happen, if somebody were to say no black people are allowed in my establishment, that place would close their doors in the matter of weeks. That would be a place I wouldn't go to. That's a place that obviously they'd get rid of 13% of the population by saying a terrible rule like that. But again, when government gets involved, they're saying it's acceptable for somebody with a certain religious point of view to say, I don't want to serve this group of people because it's against my religion. But if somebody on the other side, somebody without a religious point of view says, I don't want to service a certain group of people for whatever the reason is, you have to service them. That it doesn't make any sense. You're protecting some people, you're not protecting other people. That's why I think the government needs to be out of it altogether. Because again, in this situation, when we're talking about the Australian government kind of being the arbiters of what is acceptable discourse and not acceptable discourse, there's going to be a gray area in there where people are not going to agree on what should be acceptable. Whatever people's viewpoints are, they should be allowed to have them. And it's just a shame that the government has gone this far, especially in a place like Australia. UN Human Rights Chief, hate speech has no place in our world. Geneva, June 16th, 2023. The UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, Volker Turk, has called on everyone to work together to build a more respectful and civil world and for effective action to end hate speech ahead of International Day of Countering Hate Speech on the 18th of June. So a couple things with that. One, there's a day for everything now. So I don't even know how people even keep up with these special days for whatever the reason is. So that's completely ridiculous to have a day for basically everything. And then number two, an international, I hate that. I don't like when the government steps in and says we have to recognize A or we have to recognize B. There should be fairly limited holidays, but having the entire world recognize hate speech and a countering hate speech day is just absolutely absurd. Quote, we know that the spread of hate is used by those who want to sow division, to scapegoat, and distract from real issues. Social media is a remarkably fertile ground for hate speech, providing it with both unprecedented reach and speed. And hate breeds bigotry, discrimination, and incitement of violence, said Turek. He's not wrong with the speed and the reach that social media has kind of created over the last dozen years or so. So he's not wrong on that. But again, when you're talking about cracking down on hate speech, who are the people that are being the arbiters of what is hate speech and what is not hate speech? And I just don't trust these people. I don't know why anyone would trust a worldwide governing body to make sure that people are using the acceptable discourse online. It doesn't make any sense to me. What must be done? There's no silver bullet, no switch to be flipped that will rid our world of hate online or offline. But with targeted and well-resourced measures, we can succeed in limiting its spread, isolating and holding accountable hate mongers, and building greater respect. Again, who is he going to account as, or who's he going to count as a hate monger? Is he going to say somebody that says, I don't like this group of people, or I don't like that group of people? He's going to pick the groups of people that are acceptable to hate, or he and his small group of cronies are going to pick what group is acceptable to hate and what group is unacceptable to hate. That's the issue more than anything when it comes to this, is they are going to be the people that pick that, and not everyone's going to agree. So therefore, as long as there's not a direct incitement of violence, harassment, or a threat to somebody's life or physical safety, as much as you might not like it, I might not like what people have to say, it needs to be allowed. There's just nothing, there's nothing more to say about it than that, because there's no way for one person or one group of people to pick what's right and what's wrong. So here's he then has a list, a multifaceted and well-resourced efforts, including holding companies responsible for what they are and what they are not, doing to respect human rights, including by requiring human rights due diligence with regards to their operations and increasing transparency around hate speech policies and practices. More also needs to be done addressing mega spreaders, those officials and influencers whose voices have profound impact and whose examples inspire thousands of others, Turek said. We must build networks and amplify voices that can cut through the hate. Again, they're going to pick who gets amplified. They want to pick who gets amplified and who gets suppressed. And like I said just earlier, the best way to counter hate speech is better speech. And then you have this story from NPR. Zelensky has consolidated Ukraine's TV outlets and dissolved rival political parties. Now, this is from last year. President Zelensky has consolidated all TV platforms in Ukraine into one state broadcast and restricted political rivals. Political opposition fears such civil liberty constraints could continue. This is pretty egregious. I don't know how anyone takes this as anything other than propaganda. I mean, if you shut down any political opposition out there and the only broadcast that's allowed is things that particular regime approves of, that's propaganda 101 right there. Anyone who believes that this is not happening in Ukraine, you could want Ukraine to win the war and still hate what Zelensky has been doing over there. I was a pretty big supporter of Zelensky when this first kicked off. I liked his attitude, his don't send me a ride, send me guns. I thought that was something that inspired people and that people would rally around, and they did. But since then, I have not been a big fan of Volodymyr Zelensky. I think he's done a lot of things that you would see out of a totalitarian regime. Now, I get they're in the middle of a war, but something like that cannot be allowed. And I know America's guilty of this and has done it in the past. But in today's day and age, this is really not something that should fly under the radar, and it really has over the last year or so. Continuing on. Ukraine has to take extraordinary measures to fight Russia's invasion. Among them, the government has consolidated the country's television outlets and dissolved rival political parties. It says it needs to do this to maintain a united front in fighting Russia. NPR's Emily Fang reports from Kyiv. So this is NPR reporter Emily Fang. Fang, this is a swanky studio for Kyiv-based television station Priemy, which means direct. It was once owned by former Ukrainian president and billionaire Petro Poroshenko. He was also a political competitor of Zelensky's, and Priemy's reporters have been excluded from the new national broadcast and most cable networks. Svetlana Orlovska. We were switched from digital broadcast and excluded from national channel. We have not been provided any reason for this. Fang. Even before Russia invaded in February, some of Ukrainians' opposition media outlets said that they faced political pressures from Zelensky's government. Vladimir Mizelsky directs one of Ukraine's oldest TV stations, Channel 5. It was previously owned by former President Poroshenko, who sold his media holdings under a 2021 Ukrainian law. Mizelsky. After Channel 5 was sold, the government suspected the sale was false and Poroshenko still controlled the station. We felt consistently pressured from institutions like the broadcast regulator. We have numerous lawsuits filed against us by current and former members of parliament. Fang, why the government attention, I ask him. Meslinsky, I think we were switched off because there was a fear at this time and we would not support the president's point of view. Again, guys, dangerous stuff here. Dangerous stuff. If you don't think that this is something that leads to authoritarianism, you're absolutely wrong. You could like what Zelensky's doing in terms of fighting, but this is something that's unacceptable. From Yahoo, elections in Ukraine will be held in 2024 only if martial law is ended by then, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in an interview with the BBC on June 22nd. Zelensky emphasized that according to the Ukrainian constitution, no elections could be held in the country while martial law remains in effect. Now, if that's the law, then that's the law. Whether you like it or not, they're going to suspend the elections. The problem is martial law, and this is similar to what we saw during COVID. The state of emergency. What constitutes an emergency? Why are we under a state of an emergency? How long can it last without having some type of check and balance? There needs to be an outline for these type of things. If the martial law applies only when they are currently battling with the Russian forces, and it's clearly laid out in their constitution, then that's fine. But if there's no end to when martial law could potentially end, then you might see someone like Zelensky, and I'm not saying he's going to do this, but he possibly could, extend martial law for as long as he wants to, and just claim, hey, we're under martial law, can't have an election. So that's the danger in all this. So meanwhile, there has been some wins against some of these woke companies. So UK Daily Mail published yesterday a story saying that the two of the VPs that were behind the Dylan Mulvaney ad campaign were ousted. Now they've kind of retracted that because the Anheuser-Busch CEO has come out and said, well, they haven't been fired, but they are still on leave. So according to the UK Daily Mail, Anheuser-Busch executives have seemingly denied reports that the company fired two top marketing executives who were found responsible for Bud Light's disastrous Dylan Mulvaney campaign. The Daily Caller reported on Tuesday that the beer giant officially fired Group Vice President of Marketing Daniel Blake and Bud Light Marketing Vice President Alyssa Heinerschneid, citing text messages with an unknown regional marketing leader at the company. Blake and Heinerschneid were said to be taking leaves of absence amid backlash for their decision to feature the trans TikToker in a March Madness commercial. And when approached by DailyMail.com earlier this month, a friend of Heinerschneid said she's not supposed to talk about it, she can't. But in a statement to DailyMail.com, a spokesperson for Anheuser-Busch said they were still both on a leave of absence. Meanwhile, Disney continues to lose money. This report is over how much money they've lost over the last handful of box office releases. Woke Disney loses $900 million in recent box office flops as liberal agenda being pushed in movies like Lightyear and Little Mermaid turn off moviegoers. From the UK Daily Mail, the Walt Disney Company is looking at almost a $900 million loss following a series of woke flops at the box office. According to an analysis by Vigilant Renegade, which aims to look at the business and financial side of Hollywood, the last 8 studio releases put out by the company have not performed as well as expected. Guardians of the Galaxy and its most recent endeavor, a live-action version of The Little Mermaid, have failed to meet expectations, while 2 other recent films, Strange World and Lightyear, were complete failures. One more important aspect we always discuss here, which is worth reminding everybody about, is that Disney retains exclusive rights to its content after theatrical releases. So this is very important to not only the loss of nearly $1 billion over the last few films, but what that means in terms of them potentially making it up. Previously, they had been able to license those out to other streaming services, so they would sell the rights to those streaming services. Now they retain everything in-house. So everything that they're already getting from Disney Plus memberships has already been accounted for, and they're not going to make any additional revenue on these movies. The piece continues here stating just that. Disney no longer licenses content such as Marvel Cinematic Universe to third-party platforms such as Netflix and Amazon, and therefore has forfeited billions of dollars in potential revenue. So they need to make smash hits. They need to be able to make that money at the box office and get people, because of how well these movies are received, They need to drive people to their platform instead of being able to just license it out to a Netflix or an Amazon Prime. So just great stuff from Disney. They continue to take it on the chin. It was going to be a slower burn than Bud Light, but they are still seeing a lot of the backlash that they probably didn't think that they would be seeing because of the very unique content that they put out and how exclusive their content is. So meanwhile, the kings of pushing this corporate woke nonsense, BlackRock, is coming out. The CEO, Larry Fink, is saying he is no longer going to be using the term that he essentially created, ESG, which is environmental social governance. From Reuters, BlackRock boss Larry Fink, at the forefront of the business world's adoption of environmental, social, and corporate governance standards, has stopped using the term, saying it has become too politicized. ESG, a catch-all term that encompasses a range of ethically responsible business practices, from curbing carbon emissions to cracking down on discrimination in the workplace, has become politically polarizing in parts of the Western world, especially in the United States. Quote, I don't use the word ESG anymore because it's become entirely weaponized by the far left and weaponized by the far right, Fink said. But he still said dropping references to ESG would not change BlackRock's stance. The firm would continue to talk to companies it has stakes in about decarbonization, corporate governance, and social issues to be addressed, he added. Again, I mean, he might be dropping the term, and they kind of buried it a little bit in there, saying, like, he's no longer going to be using the term. People might interpret that as they're no longer going to be pushing it. Trust me, they're going to be pushing it. It's just not going to be out there in the open. So don't trust these people. I've mentioned this before. If there's a way for you to get your money away from these BlackRocks, away from Vanguard, State Street, away from Fidelity, do so if you can. Now, I'm not going to recommend a particular place. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. But these are the companies that are voting on these ESG issues by proxy of your vote. Your vote, and everyone who owns a portfolio on one of these investment firms, they essentially vote for you in board meetings. So you wonder why everything moved all the way to the left. Well, it's companies like this that have 7-8% of these large corporations just from BlackRock alone, Vanguard, State Street. You add all these together, there's somewhere between, in a lot of cases, 20 to 30%. They're going to listen to those shareholders, even though that's your money that they're managing. So if you can, get your money out of these large corporations because they are essentially voting against your values. As I mentioned, I'm filming this on June 28th, almost the end of Pride Month. I think we've had enough Pride to fill us for the rest of our lifetimes with this Pride Month that we've had here in June of 2023. But no, that's not enough. According to the Washington Times, Biden official Rachel Levine wants to prolong Pride Month to a summer of Pride. This year's Pride Month has been rougher than most for Bud Light, Target, and the Los Angeles Dodgers. But Admiral Rachel Levine wants the LGBTQ celebration to last the entire summer. Admiral Levine, the Biden administration's Assistant Secretary for Health and Human Services and first transgender official to win Senate confirmation, announced that this is, quote, Summer of Pride in a video posted last week on the HHS Department Instagram account. Happy Pride Month. And actually, let's declare Pride Summer, said the transgender official who is an admiral in the U.S. Public Health Service. Happy Summer of Pride. It's important to have Pride as a celebration for our LGBTQI plus community and recognize how far we have come, but also how much work we have left to do, she said. I mean, I talked about it earlier, the International Day Against Hate Speech, whatever they want to call it, like that's ridiculous. And then these entire months where we have to celebrate something that has nothing to do with this. I don't care if gay people want to celebrate the month of June, go ahead and celebrate the month of June. But I don't want to be part of the celebration. And you shouldn't want me to be part of the celebration. Frankly, I'm pretty boring. So go ahead, celebrate, have a good time. But don't shove this down everyone's throat. Not everybody wants to celebrate something that has absolutely nothing to do with them. These people should be happy that they are who they are. Sure, fine. But that has nothing to do with me. I don't have a month celebrating being Irish. There's St. Patrick's Day, which I don't even celebrate that, but still, it's it's a little bit overkill when it comes to how long this lasts, and now they want to make it last even longer. This is all in them saying, we're not coming for your children, we're not grooming, there's nothing to see here. A couple of weekends ago in New York, they had a pride march saying exactly that they're coming for your children. So here's what that looked like. Video is really, I don't really know what to say. They're saying the quiet part out loud. The reaction to this from the left is going to obviously be like, no, that they were just joking. Really? They were just joking? You believe that they were just joking? So NBC News, over the weekend, a short video circulated widely on social media of an unidentified person at New York City March Pride festivities saying, "We're coming for your children." In the 21-second clip, circulated by a right-wing web streamer channel, dozens of people marching the streets clearly heard chanting, "We're here, we're queer, and we're not shopping." But one voice is louder in the crowd. It's not clear whose, or whether the speaker was a member of the LGBT community, is heard saying at least twice, "We're here, we're queer, we're coming for your children." Griffin said he chanted obscene things in the past like, "Kill, kill, kill, we're coming to kill the mayor," and joked about pubic hair and sex toys during the march. People at the drag march regularly sing, "God is a lesbian." It's all just words, Griffin said. It's all presented to fulfill their worst stereotypes of us. The "coming for your children" chant has been used for years at Pride events, according to longtime march attendees and gay rights activists, who said it's one of the most provocative expressions used to regain control of slurs against LGBTQ people. And in this case, they said, right-wing activists are jumping on a single video to weaponize an out-of-context remark to further stigmatize the queer community. I love that in this article here, this Griffin talks about, oh, we've chanted obscene things in the past, like "kill the mayor." Like that makes it better. Like that should be something that's like, oh, don't worry about it. We just want to kill the mayor. We just want to groom your children. This is their way of saying, like, this isn't actually happening. You just think it's happening, and we're just going to make fun of you for it. But a Gallup poll, so this is from last year. It says Americans self-identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or something other than heterosexual. If you look at this chart here, this Gallup poll, back in 2012, 3.5% identified. You see 2013, 3.6, 3.7, 3.9. So it's slowly on the increase. Then 4.1 in 2016, 4.5 in 2017. Then 2020 jumps all the way up to 5.6. In 2021, 7.1. Now you go down here and you look at the Americans self-identified as LGBT by generation and look at the percentages by generation. You look at traditionals, 0.8, baby boomers, 2.6, Gen X, 4.2, millennials, 10.5, Gen Z, the kids, 20.8. So yes, they are coming for the kids. There's no way to explain this exponential leap in people that identify as LGBT other than the fact that there's an overwhelming left-wing tilt in the classroom, and these people are cramming down this LGBT agenda into these classrooms. Now, I don't care if people are gay. It doesn't really matter. But let kids be kids. They shouldn't be talking about anything sexual. Forget about all this pride stuff that's going to be that's being crammed down in classrooms. So when they say they're not coming for your kids, and then they chant, "We're coming for your kids," and then you see statistics like that, they are absolutely coming for your kids. That's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Make sure that you hit the like button, subscribe, and share with friends and family if you like the content you see here today, and I'll see you in the next video.